Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Host City Americas. Continuing on the theme of event impacts that we were exploring in the previous panel. This next panel is going to go into a bit more detail into two particular areas of event impact, about the role of events in promoting people and places. And we're delighted to have a panel of some familiar faces to Host City and some new faces too. AIPH, Tim Briercliffe is on this panel to speak about the impact of the horticultural expos, which are a particularly interesting kind of event that has great benefits for the host cities. He's joined by Anita DeFrantz from the IOC, and Jimena Saldaña from the Pan American Sports Organization, and Stephen Mifsud, who's the CEO of Direct Access. And it's over to Grant MacDonald now, the Chief Operating Officer of Sport Tourism Canada, to introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody today. I am pleased to be joined by our esteemed panelists. As Ben mentioned, we do have Anita DeFrantz, member of the IOC, as well as a board member with LA28 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Jimena Saldaña, Vice President, Panam Sports Organization. Tim Briercliffe from the International Association of Horticultural Producers, and Stephen Mifsud, an MBE and CEO of Direct Access. I should also point out that Stephen is hearing impaired, and there will be a slight delay as Stephen reads the closed captioning associated with today's panel. So I would ask all of our audience members to be aware of that, and just to understand that that delay will be there as part of our conversation. We welcome you all. We look forward to your insights. And by way of introduction, I thought that each of our panelists may be able to share in their opening remarks based on some initial questions. So Anita, we'll start with you. As an Olympian, you've experienced firsthand in Los Angeles the impact a major games can have on a city. With your involvement in LA28, what opportunities do you see for the Olympic and Paralympic Games to offer to the citizens of LA and California? And how has it changed for you since 1984?
Thank you. That question has a lot to it. Certainly, what happened to the city of Los Angeles in '84 was remarkable because, first of all, I don't think we realized that we were a city. We were lots of little cities, all kind of patchwork together. Yet, for 1984, we became one city, Los Angeles, and we were hosting the world at the Olympic Games. Certainly for now, that was '84. Now we switch around the numbers, and now we're 2028, and that's going to be extraordinarily exciting. It already is. How many organizing committees can say that they started out with something new and different, as we did?
Oh, I think we might have lost connection with Anita, but we'll bring... Anita, you froze there for us, and you were mid-sentence. Sorry.
Well, I was bragging on LA and its logo, which changes constantly and brings in all the ideas that the city has. And that's what I love about LA. It's a city where people can come and put down their own stakes and have great ideas. And now our logo, LA28, brings those ideas to it every single time you see it, with the A being new and up to date.
Excellent. And Jimena, in the lead up to Santiago 2023, and within the 41 member nations of the Americas and the Pan Am Games movement, how does the Pan Am Sports Organization view the Pan American Games and its role in promoting the people in those 41 member nations and the places in which those games are competed?
Well, Grant, actually, we are very excited because in the Pan American Sports Organization during our history, there were two occasions actually where Santiago had bid to host the games, and unfortunately they had different situations that enabled them to have the games. And this time they're working very hard. We're very excited to go back to the city. It's a brilliant city now. It's changed a lot since the first time that they were supposed to host the games. And we're very much looking forward to it because we understand this as a new path also for the Panam Sports Organization. Panam Sports has become renewed, even in its logo. Now we have the channel, and we're looking for more technology and to increase greater windows to open up and have larger viewers looking at our games. So we're very much excited into it. We are actually planning to have more windows. As I was saying, we're having different platforms, the apps, and we're including actually now ambassadors to our games. So we're bringing this message over to all the countries, the 41 countries that form our organization are already involved. And we're dealing with all the athletes already that have been already qualifying. So I think it's going to be a major change also for the way we look at the Pan Am Games. I think it's very exciting. And of course, we're hand in hand also looking forward to Paris and LA, because having the games in our continent is really exciting. And I think as we were supposed to talk about this today, the role of this event in Santiago is very, very important. I think people are crossing through a new stage in our continent. You know, we have different phenomena going on, different changes. And I think this is going to be a very nice window to make a union of all our countries again, you know, to show this brotherhood and the solidarity together, the fraternity. So it's going to be very exciting.
Thank you, Jimena. And Tim, with AIPH and the International Association of Horticultural Producers are not a sporting event, as we pointed out at last year's Host City Americas, but your expos can transform areas of cities, entire cities and regions into green spaces that can engage residents and visitors alike. How do these expos provide the opportunity to promote the people and places that they are staged?
Well, thank you for that. And it's good to just have the opportunity just to explain a little about what we are, because we're not a sports event. We're quite different. And at the heart of what we do in AIPH, our mission is that we are the world's champion for the power of plants. And it's about how we can use plants in our cities to create green cities that will improve people's lives and will tackle the impacts of climate change in our cities. And the good use of plants and the landscape, both in the public sector and in people's individual lives, is part of what cities need to face these challenges of the future. And there's so much research to show the benefits that the right use of plants and the landscape will bring in cities, and how making livable cities. So our expos, we have the rights to approve the International Horticultural Expo. You'll be familiar, I'm sure, with the World Expo, like the one that took place in Dubai recently. Well, we produce the horticultural equivalents of that. We are written into the convention of the BIE. So if a country wants to host International Horticultural Expo and invite other countries to participate, that's why they require the approval from us by international convention. Now, these events are large in scale. They take many years to prepare. We currently have one running in Almere near Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and that they've run that every 10 years in the Netherlands, and it covers over 50 hectares. They have over 30 countries participating, and huge visitor numbers. When we talk about the last big one that we had, that was been in Beijing in 2019, that was particularly huge, covering 500 hectares and 10 million visitors, 100 countries. But these they can range in size and scale, and they run for about 6 months, and people can come and they can experience different countries' representation of what green is, how to use plants, creating beautiful gardens, pavilions, how sustainability needs to be a part of our life. So they're educational, they're B2B, they're direct to the consumer, they're entertainment events, they're all of those kind of things. But critically, they leave behind them a legacy a park and the memories that come with the holding a big event like that. And it tends to define those cities into the future. They become an expo city where these events have, and they're left with a beautiful park made with gardens from all over the world, which people will enjoy long into the future. So this is a bit of background to our events that are organised by the cities that we approve.
Thank you, Tim. And for those that have the chat open and are looking for more information on AIPH, please do click on that link. And next to Stephen, your life's work has been around making the world more inclusive. Through this work, you've personally experienced the shift to more inclusive events. And I wanted to ask you to start off with, what can we do better?
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Stephen Mifsud. I'm delighted to be here. Grant, thank you very much for the heads up on my hearing impairment and reading the caption. So we are Direct Access, we advise events and organisations on how to become more inclusive for disabled people. In the past 4 years, and particularly in the last 6 months, we've been working with Expo 2020. And so the last 6 months, I took the role of Director of Accessibility at Expo. Gosh, we've just come out of a pandemic. And to be fair, what I've learned in the last 2 years about accessibility exceeds anything that I've learned in the entire 20 years. So that event, whilst it's not significantly sport, it was similar in nature, and it had 24 million visitors over 6 months. Now, what we've learned is the impact of COVID had accelerated technology, and we've learned new ways in how to make technology accessible for disabled people, such as captioning in video conference call. I think in terms of what we can do better, is we need to understand that accessibility doesn't start at the event. We need to consider accessibility from home to the event and to the event back to home. And that doesn't just mean a car journey. That means from your house to the airport, to the airport in the other country, to the hotel, to the event. And technology plays a massive, massive part in that. And I think to answer the question toward more inclusive event, we need to push on with that and give disabled people information in their hand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And that's an excellent point about the entire journey from door to door to make sure that everybody can have access. Anita, let's go back to you. And you've been a champion for equity, diversity, and inclusion for many years. How can events impact these areas in a meaningful way for the benefit of people and the communities in which these events take place?
Well, these events can make an enormous difference as people learn that they can be compassionate towards others without knowing them. I know back in '84, there were people who were parking at other people's houses and became friends, and that friendship continued for 20 years. They would still have those, what we call them, tailgate parties decades later because they became friends across keeping their car there at the Olympic Games during the events. There's so many things people to people that happen during major events. Stories that you'll learn about maybe 10 years later or 10 seconds later as a policeman stops the traffic midway in a street so that a grandmother and grandchild can cross over and get to the event they wanted to see. I like to say the reason there's more than one person on the face of the earth is that we're supposed to learn to work together. And these events help us a lot to work together. We have to plan, how are people going to be fed? Of course, transportation, which we discussed earlier, and feeding and housing, and then the events themselves. And how do the athletes learn about the events? If it's a sports events, how do they get involved in sports? So there are just so many layers to this. But once you get started and you're determined to get through, it's a wonderful ride all the time. It's a wonderful ride. You learn so much about yourself and about other people, and how many services there are you may not know about in your communities that have to be called upon in order to make sure that the event goes well. I mean, it's one thing to have a sports event and you're at the venue, but what about all the trash after the event? Where does that go? I mean, there are just so many pieces to making things work that it is the ultimate working together. I experienced that in '84 and through the games that I've been able to take part in as an IOC member since then. And it's really about people working together.
Excellent. Well said, Anita. And having that compassion and being open to working together. And as you point out, the fact that many of the lasting memories occur outside of the field of play or outside of that venue, in the case of Tim's parks. So Tim, let's go next to you. And you've had some significant horticultural expos all over the world, and they have been a platform to engage residents, but also to attract visitors. How have you seen those make a difference with equity, diversity, and inclusion for the residents in the locations where they take place?
Well, involving the residents and the community is really vital from the beginning, because you're about to take up a significant chunk of land, which probably matters to someone. It matters to the people that are near it. You're going to do something which is going to affect the reputation of their city and is going to have an impact on their lives. And they need to be part of it. And as Stephen knows, I'm sure, from working in Dubai on the expo really does need to include everybody, because they are about education and development and moving the world forward. And so it's critical that we involve schools and children, and they're often involved even before the expo begins in different programs where they will be developing reasons why they would come, what they would learn, building input into what may be even shown and delivered and implemented in the expo itself. It's really important that you provide a range of attractions for different communities and groups. One of the real benefits of an expo is that you have many countries of the world coming together that put on their own national days, providing cultural performances, cultural foods, different foods from different countries. And it's a real way of learning, understanding different countries, cultures and communities. And they become real points of celebration of the diversity of the world and everyone coming together. And the expo really builds that feel that you are a citizen of the world rather than just a citizen of your own city or of your own country. We think it's very important to develop volunteer programs as well, which are open to everybody. And for us, I think we find that the groups that might be interested or need to be attracted more vary from different parts of the world. So I come from the UK, where we've got a strong history of gardening and plants. And that's also the same in the Netherlands now. But it might be associated with a certain demographic of people who might come because they're coming to see a garden exhibition, whereas in many other parts of the world, there's not a culture of that, and people are coming for whole different reasons. And it's about how we bring in all different age groups, through to the expos in Europe, through bringing in food and culture and concerts and entertainment, and how you introduce the wonder and the beauty of plants and flowers and how they can impact your lives to parts of the world where that's not been a part of their experience growing up, and they don't have necessarily their own space to grow things. So making horticulture and growing plants and flowers accessible to everyone, whatever their circumstances, whether they live in an apartment or they have a garden or whatever it may be, or just in their own home, is really a core part of what will make that expo successful and make everybody remember it after it's all finished.
Thank you, Tim. And Jimena, within the Americas, and we've talked about the 41 member nations of the Pan Am Sports Organization, there's a wide range of countries, cultures, language, all of those factors. But what have you seen as some positive steps in the advancement of equity, diversity, and inclusion over the recent past?
Well, certainly, Grant, it's been an amazing change, and Anita is also a witness of this. But I have to go a little bit back of telling you, because when I heard Anita, I had to say this, for the Mexico Olympic Games in 1968, and this is 50 years ago, you know, we went through so many changes in our city. It was very impressive to see how we tried, since the language was not very well spoken, and we all spoke Spanish only, and we were receiving everybody from around the world. It was so difficult for us to find a way to have people understand how we moved around the city. So one of the first steps during these games that we helped out to have the games more accessible was a way of painting the streets and the paths with flags of the different colors of the venues where you were supposed to meet. I mean, for example, if you wanted to go to the track and field stadium, you would follow all the pink signs around the city, you know, the flags or the way the roads were even painted. And when you arrived to the venue, it was already painted in pink. So it was pretty exciting. And I was just going to emphasize what Anita was saying. The games are about the people. And we did also for the 1975 games in Mexico City. It was also a way of uniting our citizens and making them understand we were all the hosts. You know, it's sometimes people were so eager to do this that you go out in the streets and you are welcoming everybody. And then we became real close, and we became home actually of Panam Sports for a while. Our head office is over there already. So right now we were very, very much interested in showing off this solidarity, this brotherhood that we have in the continent. I think it's very important, going back to the role of these events in promoting people and places, as you were saying, Grant. It's very impressive how young people are very much involved in ESG, you know, in the environment, which goes back to what Tim was saying, you know, the way we also need to change the cities and the look of the cities, and the greener they are and the most friendly with the environment, the most pleasure it gives to all the people that are celebrating this event. So we have to go back to what the young people are asking for, and totally it's come the social, it becomes environment, it's become to make you more inclusive. You have to understand that, you know, we're made out of different races, ethnicities, and we need to be friends. And I think that the Olympic Games and the Pan Am Games and the Central American and Caribbean Games gives you this together in just a couple of weeks. So I think it's very important for all of us to understand that young people are looking for this, and the events have to become more friendly, to be more accessible, to be more friendly with the environment, and to understand that we're all different, but at the same time we're driven to this kind of sports events together because we have the same interest, you know. We're trying to make the athletes always the center of our games. So it's very important to give to the athletes and the spectators what they're looking for in these events. So I think it becomes very important to understand the diversity, but as well to give, you know, to make it inclusive and friendly. And of course, we have to go hand in hand with all these objectives that I was saying, the athletes and the young people are looking for. So I think it's very important, Grant, that we understand this as organizations and that we devote part of our efforts not only to making this friendly games for athletes, but also for the spectators. So I think it's important not to lose that from our side.
Excellent point, Jimena. And having those events as mile markers to future improvements or enhancements dating back from 1968 is very important, is to recognize the progression that has happened over those many years, but also from event to event. Now, Stephen, you've mentioned Expo and your experiences there. Are there other trends that you've seen over the past number of years based on your work with direct access or otherwise in the inclusion of everybody that is seeking the opportunity to be involved and to gain benefit?
Okay, I'd just like to add a few things. Anita talking about the meaningful way the event can help people in community. One thing with Expo 2020, it wasn't just about making an accessible event for the visitor, but also for the staff, the volunteers, the children, and that enhanced the community because particularly in the Middle East, there may not be the same opportunity that some countries have. So there were many disabled people or people of determination in Dubai who actually became volunteers at Expo, and that was one of their first real life experiences of work. And quite a few of them have now gone on to jobs. So events have a very, very important part in giving people that confidence. Also with Tim talking about the plant, absolutely, I completely agree about their importance because if you look at the pandemic, when everybody was isolating, what happened? Animals were on the street, the trees started overgrowing, nature started reclaiming, and also research had shown that horticulture had a large part to play with individuals neurodivergent, people who are anxious, autistic, and they can find a lot of reassurance and calmness from plants. Now, in terms of trend we're seeing, at the moment, we are sort of taking a stance of where we're all winging it because there is no rule book for what the future looks like after a pandemic. So this actually means that a lot of guidance out there is now redundant. So a lot of guidance says that you should have tactile and braille signage everywhere. But hang on, we've come off from a world where we are encouraged now not to touch things and we have to sanitize everything. As a result of that, the trend is we're starting to think about what do you think would work? And so we are starting to share knowledge. The world has become smaller and we are starting to look at global expertise in projects. And that's the way universal design is going at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And that's an excellent point that coming out of the pandemic, we don't necessarily want to revert back to where we were going into the pandemic. And we need to learn and be open to new ideas, new innovation, and potentially even new technologies. And that is where we're going to explore next. And Stephen, we'll go right back to you because you are a living example of the benefits of technology as a cochlear implant user. How can technology be used? And you've touched on it a little bit, but how can technology be used to help neurodivergent individuals within main events? And how can we ensure that we are taking full advantage of all the technologies that we now have access to?
Okay, there's quite a lot of answer to that question. I would just like to say that even though I have a cochlear implant and it's a tool, it's not, it hadn't made me a hearing person. It had made it easier for me to fit in your society. So typically, as a disabled person, it has been society that disabled the actual person, not the impairment itself. And I think technology had a long way potential to start bringing those barriers down. So one of the very basic things that I see, which is omitted, is that we spend so much effort and time in making venues accessible, providing accessible features, accessible bathroom, but then on the web, the internet, we're not actually talking about the availability of these facilities. So you could have one of the most accessible events in the world, but then there's nothing on the website that says that that is accessible. So, and it is proven that about 80% of disabled people will research something before they go. In terms of neurodivergent individuals, we now have at Expo, we had something called sensory rating cards, which were produced by Sensory Access in Seattle. And what they did is every area at Expo actually had a sensory rating, and that was based on hearing, visual, smell, terrain, and touch, those 5 senses. Because what we've got to remember is with neurodivergent individuals, not one person fits a box. Everybody is unique. And this enables people to give choices in where they want to go. And that was one of the successful things we did at Expo. And we had those sensory rating cards on an app. So I will just say, finishing on that, I think as a society and in global events in general, we need to not just enjoy the sport, but we need to learn how to celebrate our differences. Thank you.
And celebrating our differences is so important.
I have one more.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay, one more thing that is working really, really well at the moment is due to the pandemic, we now know how to use QR codes because of the track and trace. So I've been here, I hope I don't catch COVID. But what we did at Expo and we're now doing in museum is that we are using QR code to trigger sign language interpretation and also audio narration for people with impaired vision. So again, that is something that we've learned from the pandemic. Thank you.
And the QR code has certainly made a significant impact over the past 2.5 years. Anita, how about for you? You've been involved in many major games as both an athlete and now as a leader in sport internationally. How have you seen technology evolve for the benefit of people in place?
Well, there's been some remarkable changes. I'm sorry, I keep going back to 84. We actually had the internet in 84, and the athletes could communicate with one another. And as the days went on, some of those communications got to be, shall we say, a bit warm. But it was a way of introducing the world to something that nobody had ever thought of before. We also had voicemail, which ended once the games were over and all of us went into despondence because we couldn't just leave a message for our friends anymore. But now, who can think of a world without the internet? And yet, for the 84 games, that was the only place the internet existed. Now it exists everywhere. Technology has done so much to improve the games. The size of the footprint for television, for example, television is still essential to make sure that people can see what goes on at the games. And at the, of course, I have to say, the Pan Am games as well, and the regional games, so that people can understand what's happened. Not, the written word is important, but seeing it happen, being a part of that history is so important. So the games have traveled along with technology, and of course with the Paralympic Games as well. We've learned a lot over the years, and LA is delighted finally to be hosting the full Paralympic Games in 28. We hosted some events in track and field in 84, but that's all that we were allowed to do. But again, it's for everybody. I'm going to take this opportunity to put in my little thing that I learned from my mother. We are one race, the human race. We are all the same, and yet we're each unique. Even identical twins are not identical. So we need to recognize one another as human and not worried about this notion of race, because we are one race, the human race, and we need to respect each person for what they have to offer.
Anita, your mother was very wise, as are you. Jimena, let's go to you and talk about, as it relates to the Americas and within North, Central, and South America and the Caribbean, how has technology enhanced, whether it's the Pan Am Games or whether it's other potentially single sport events or other activities throughout the Americas?
Well, definitely, Grant, and I'm not trying to brag, but I've been around for many years. So I actually lived a lot through all of these changes, and I've seen how not only sports, but also our events and our games have benefited so much from technology. I mean, we have to understand that also what Stevens was saying, to make the games more accessible, it doesn't only mean to make it accessible on site, but to make it accessible for them to view it from their countries, to get the tickets, to travel. We were working on all that. And I think that Central American games, the regional games, now we have so many different editions around our own continent, and of course the Panam Sports Games have become really, really very close to technology. We're understanding that not only because of the pandemic, for instance, as we were saying, the audience for the Tokyo Olympic Games was for more than 3 billion people. So if you imagine that and you bring it down to our continental games, it's really impressive. That's why we focused on having the Panam channel from Panam Sports, because we understand that you have to give every country a chance, an opportunity for the families of the athletes to watch them online, to be able to be there at the events. Not everybody can travel and not everybody can move around as we wished, and we really are having this new window through our Panam Sports channel. Very impressive and very important, because technology, Grant, is not only a way of, we've seen it also with the athletes. It not only improves and enhances the actual performance of athletes, with the new fabrics, with the new technology in even the tennis shoes, and the new technology that's bringing these facilities, sports facilities, so that people can really feel they're in the field of the game, So it's really very important, and I think it's always a matter of understanding how technology helps our events, and not the other way around, because I think we always have to focus on the importance, as Anita was saying, of having the people and the athletes as the center of our games. So I think it's important to use technology as best as we can in order to make it accessible, to make it more well-known, and increasing the excitement. After all, our games become that, of making people stand around the screen and just sharing those emotions and looking at our own athletes get the medals. And really, I think that right now, innovation is the name of the game. Technology is also trying to improve every year on every sports event how the way we look at these events. And I think that's something we also learned during the pandemic. Who would have ever thought that Tokyo, And we were looking so much forward to going there and sharing this great technology they have been showing off for so many years of what we, even as a spectator, if you were going to arrive to the airport, about the facial recognition and all of these great things that we were being shown. And unfortunately, the pandemic came, and then suddenly we're having games without public. So again, technology played a very important role, and I think we've learned a lot from that because we've become closer. And I think that is really exciting for us, as I was saying, even in our own continent and in the Olympic Games, of how using technology to make these games better.
Thank you, Jimena. And I've also clearly, you can see from the look of me, been around for many of these technological changes as well. So yes, it has been certainly quite an evolution over the last half century or so. And Tim, when it comes to horticultural expos and with AIPH, how have you been using technology? You mentioned it earlier, you hearken back to a simpler time when we weren't so focused on technology, but I'm sure that it is offers new opportunities for AIPH to reach more residents and attract more visitors and to enhance the experience of those horticultural expos. What has technology meant to your organization and to the events that you operate?
Yeah, sure. And you're right that our prime aim is to get people to come and experience the natural world in terms of how plants can be introduced in their lives to make them come away from screens and so on. However, you're quite right. The technology is playing an increasing role in enhancing that experience. If you were to visit the Floriada Expo running at the moment in the Netherlands, you could visit the German pavilion, and in there, when you enter, you'll be given a wristband, and you have various activities that you go through to record your own experience on understanding sustainability, answering the questions, how you're really learning as you go through. And at the end, you drop this wristband into a box and it tells you your score and about you and the things that you've needed to learn. So these things are being integrated into enhancing the visitor experience when they come. QR codes were mentioned. They are a great way of being able to you can put a QR code in a flower display or a tree plantation without having to put a huge sign explaining everything. And if someone's interested, it doesn't spoil the look of the exhibit that you have there, and they can just go and find a wealth of information online by using the QR codes. Also, it's very useful in the run-up to expos. In the years that go before, often we run programs of webinars and building up on the theme that an expo might have. So in the Floriada now, their theme is Growing Green Cities. In Beijing, the theme was Live Green, Live Better. Next year in Qatar, we'll have 1 year after the World Cup there, we'll have the theme of Greening the Desert, Better Environment. And so we can build educational programs and webinars in advance using technology that can reach all over the world. And of course, that helps to promote the expo itself. And then social media provides a great way of providing video and content that will show what you can see when you come to the expo. And if you can't come, how you can enjoy it through watching that and to learn the lessons that the expo provides. So we're definitely learning all the time. It's definitely a greater feature of each expo that happens, and I don't see that changing either.
Thank you, Tim. And yes, Anita.
Yeah, as Tim just mentioned, the Greening the Desert, I wanted to mention the fact that the IOC is involved with a program to reforest the desert. The goal is to put back the forests that existed, I don't know how many millions of years ago, across the desert in the northern part of Africa. And we're working hard to get that going. So sports and horticulture can go together very well.
Great point, Anita. Thank you very much. Now, we do have just about 5 minutes left. So what I would ask of each of our panelists is, we've talked about where we've been, a little bit about what is the evolution that we're seeing over the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. And as a last word, I would open it up to each of our panelists to offer where you see it going. What's the next evolution, or where should we be going over the coming years? And maybe I'll start with you, Jimena. Where do you see the evolution of events and impacting people and places over the next number of years?
I think, Grant, that for us, and I think we have it quite clear in our continent, that now, as I was saying, we have the beach games, for instance, and we have more regional games than before. I have to go back a little bit in history and tell you that the Central American and Caribbean games are the oldest regional games in the world. And after that, even before, a little bit before, the Panam Games actually were hosted for the first time ever. And I think that we've understood that people are demanding to see more sports event, to have this kind of, as you were saying, in the social media, everything goes very fast. So we want more games, we want more events. So what we're giving is more windows and platforms for people to engage with our community and with our games. So I think Panam Sports understood this very clearly. So we're having now the first youth continental games in the Americas. We celebrated that in Cali not a while ago. And I think that we saw that there was so much interest. At some point in the Olympic movement, and Anita, I'm sure, recalls this much better than I did, because she was at the center of these decisions in the IOC, where we thought, we couldn't have more games than the Olympic Games because we were going to lose viewers probably, or the public was going to be less interested. And we're discovering, and we see this in Panam Sports very clearly, we're discovering people are demanding for more events. We want to see our athletes, the way they're preparing, the way they go to regional games, to continental games, and to Olympic Games. And I think that's becoming something that makes us more aware of what we need to give as organizations. So I think our future is very bright. I do have to say that the games have become a very nice place to be at, even if you're going to watch it on your screen, or if you're going to watch it from your own country, or if you're going to travel. I think it's very important to live these experiences. And I really think my advice to any of you, and I hope that Steve and Grant and you, Grant, and Tim will be able to be at our games at some point. I think you have to live that experience to understand what really the Olympics are made for. You really become a family. And that's why I'm very happy to be sharing this panel today with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimena. And Stephen, let's go to you. Where do you see the next evolution going for events in promoting people in place?
Okay, very quick answer, because I want everyone to have a chance to answer that. I see greater use of augmented reality. I see greater use of personal devices at event. So for an example, like captioning, I see use of Google Glasses or similar. I also see instead of physical calm sensory room, I see them potentially being done via VR headset, which would make them accessible for all. I also see sports being filmed and media provided in VR, which will enable people with more physical mobility, disability to enjoy their experience wherever they are. Thank you.
Excellent. And Tim, how about you? Where do you see this going?
Well, today I'm in a city in Hatay in Turkey, and we're here for the awards ceremony at the end of a horticultural expo here. And I was talking to the mayor this morning, and they've had a headache over the past few years preparing an event through the pandemic, and yet now he sees it as a great investment. What he has provided for his citizens is a park, and they're looking for, and a place to come and enjoy the outside and explore that. And they realize that that's what's been missing. And what I see in the future is that events like these expos are places which will become critical for exchanging ideas on how we can manage as cities to create sustainable futures, how we can use different technologies and techniques for managing the impacts of climate change in our cities, how we can use plants to cool them down, manage flooding, all these things. So it's a real exchanging of ideas and how people can improve their health and livelihood through this. So it's really, the future is about creating a sustainable world. And so that is how the emphasis of our event certainly is focusing very heavily on.
Thank you, Tim. And last word to you, Anita. Where do you see us going?
I need to ask my friend, the 6-year-old down the street, where she thinks it's going to go, because they know the future better than I could ever appreciate it. It's going to be grand as long as we learn to respect one another and appreciate what each person has to offer. And I know that my ride will end before too long, but when I get off this ride, it's just going to be a glorious, glorious memory.
Well, that is a perfect way to end it. I would like to thank each of our panelists for your time, for your insights, for your passion that has come through, obviously, to all of our audience. We appreciate everything that you do, and we look forward to what is coming next. So with that, thank you to you, thank you to our audience, and we'll pass it back over to Ben.